everyone, and welcome to the 28th Annual Autumn Goddess Festival for the Fellowship of Isis Chicago. I am so happy to be here with y'all, and I am so excited for all of the beauty and grace and just wonderment that we are going to experience today through the grace of the goddess. So welcome, welcome, blessings all around. I am Alice. For those of y'all that don't know, I am an author, an artist, and a performer. I have had the privilege of working as both a performer and vendor and presenter at festivals past. Unfortunately, due to COVID and other restrictions, I won't be able to perform for y'all this year. Very sad to be missing out on that. Hopefully next year things will get better and we'll be able to do that. But in the meantime, I wanted to share with y'all the gifts that I have been given in life, which is my writing abilities and my art abilities. And this presentation is titled The Muses Move Me, because over the years I've always been trying to find some grand overarching way to kind of explain why I do so many different creative endeavors. And honestly, I just feel this urge to work creatively, to express myself through writing, through art, through performance, just all of those sort of things. They give me such purpose and joy. As you can see from my background, I have some of my novels featured here, and that is the bulk of what we are going to be talking about today, is how I utilize my personal beliefs, my faiths, my spirituality, and all of that in my works. First and foremost, my writing. I primarily write fantasy, historical fiction, and romance. I don't really present this sort of stuff so much in my romance because a lot of that is more formulaic for the market. However, I do express myself a lot in my fantasy and my historical fiction works. In terms of my historical fiction works, I make sure that it is in line with the history that I am presenting in the story, but I do believe that presenting those belief systems is a very important part of presenting history and culture. As you can see, I have this book right here, which is titled Geisha Hands. It is my Japanese historical fiction, and I do talk about a lot of the Japanese traditions in the Shinto tradition. So that is a religion, and I use the term loosely because while it is a religion, it was also like a general living system as well. It was kind of this merging of the material world and the spiritual world in Japan, because a lot of Shinto also dictated their daily lives until Buddhism became popular in Japan. And even with the uprising of Buddhism in Japan, Shinto, even to this day, is still very important to a lot of their traditions, although it has become largely more about tradition and less about the spiritual aspect for everyday Japanese living. In the novel Geisha Hands, I do touch on that, and as I said, it is a very big part of their daily living during that time period, and especially before that time period. Just a lot of very basic things. For example, an easy one for y'all to kind of understand this concept is that Inari is the goddess. And I say that because Inari is both he and she, and both and neither all at the same time. Inari presents as however they feel like in the moment, whether that's as a woman or a man or both or neither or a fox. They are a deity of many things, but one of the main things that they are a deity of is rice. And a big part of Japanese culture is that you are not allowed to waste rice. Every grain that was cooked for the day must be consumed. Otherwise, it's a huge insult to Inari. And a big part of that was also because, especially during the feudal era, people starved. So wasting food was seen as a huge no-no. So of course, they're going to ingrain that into also the religious aspect of everyday life, that of course you're not going to waste precious food. And of course, they're going to put that in with a deity, that it will be very upsetting to this deity if you don't take advantage of the bounty of the good that they have brought before you. As well as rice has always been a very big part of Japanese culture because it is the life food of Japan. So that's also seen as currency. It's seen as a direct tie for the wealth of a house is how much food they can afford in order to feed their family, as well as sake, their alcohol made from rice. It also showcases the prosperity and wealth of a household in that they can afford alcohol to drink because that is a luxury item. And all of those things are tied to inari is rice, prosperity, and also fertility, which all goes together because, if you're not well fed, it's very hard for you to be able to get pregnant and carry a child to term and then feed that child. So all of those things are very closely tied together, all in this one deity. And a lot of the Shinto deities are like that, where they're very closely ingrained in the daily lives of the Japanese people. Now, there are a lot of the lofty deities, such as the dragons and things like that, that are more about higher part of the daily hierarchy pyramid, such as philosophy and spirituality and all that enlightenment sort of stuff. When you get to the tippy top of the pyramid, that it's, you got to meet all your other needs before you can get up there. So if you're starving down here, you're not really going to get to a very philosophical and spiritual level up here. So it also breaks down that way, that there are different levels of the Shinto beliefs based on how well off you're doing in the system, which deities you're really going to prioritize in your daily life. And also with my fantasy stories, I love to take these historical, religious, and spiritual systems in order to create, whether it's I use them directly or I use them as a template to create my own systems, such as in my book, Love of the Sea. Love of the Sea is a mermaid fantasy that kind of takes the Little Mermaid, the original Little Mermaid story, and turns it on its head, where our main character, Azrae, the female mermaid, she does turn human temporarily in order to woo her human mate. However, her goal is not for herself to be permanently human. It is to convince her male human mate, Cormac, to turn into a mer and come with her to her underwater kingdom. That is her ultimate goal in the story. Now, given that this is a huge fantasy system that I have created in this book, it has a very strong spiritual religion system built in as well. And I took the template of the god Poseidon because the story is very based around the ocean with mermaids, and also the human kingdom paradigm is a coastal kingdom, which is how Cormac and Azrae meet. And so I really wanted to kind of use that as a template with an already existing deity in that system. And yes, I do know that Poseidon is also a god of horses and things like that, but I wanted to take this very specific aspect of Poseidon. And yes, I do use literal Poseidon in this spiritual system, that they pretty much have decided that Poseidon is their main god that they all worship, that he's the main guy going on in their system. But they also recognize that there are other deities as well. Big one being Kataramenos, which is a deity that I invented for this story, and roughly translated that means the cursed one. And it's this idea of the whole creation story, which is the common thread in just about every spiritual system. There's some sort of creation story. And in this one, it's the idea of Poseidon originally created the mer people in his own image. And Kataramenos was very jealous, and he wanted to create something that could rival Poseidon's creation of the mer people. So Kataramenos created man. But the problem with that was that they weren't as good as the mer people, because the mer people had magic. So he stole, I called them the soul seed stars, which were souls, basically. And he made man immortal with souls, and mer people do not have souls. And so that really pissed off Poseidon, and he cursed mankind, saying that they will not have access to the magical wellspring the way that the mer people do, because they have disrupted the natural order and see themselves as mortal gods because they have souls. So that's kind of the creation story that we have going on for Love of the Sea that I invented for this religious system. And so it's kind of this whole pushback between how the mer people and humans are similar but also different, and how they both view Poseidon as their main deity, but they have different ways that they view him. So I play with that whole dynamic. I also play with the dynamic of rituals and spells and magic in Love of the Sea. A big part of that can be seen in the wedding scene in Love of the Sea. There are a lot of rituals, there's a lot of magic going on. I don't really want to give y'all any spoilers if y'all haven't read the book yet. It's an absolutely beautiful scene. I enjoyed writing it so much. And here's a little secret for y'all. I actually based a lot of the rituals and the wedding rituals on one of the rituals that was done here, actually, at one of the festivals. It was a few years back at the Artemis Festival, and I was just so incredibly inspired by that particular ritual that I wanted to kind of build this ritual system around what I witnessed that evening, because it was just so beautiful. It just filled me with inspiration, and so yes, that if y'all read that scene and it seems a little familiar, that's why. So, I definitely want to thank all y'all for inspiring that particular scene in my story. And of course, this entire community has really helped to give a richness to my works through giving me access to this information, and also the history, most importantly, the history behind a lot of these spiritual and religious systems. And that means so much to me because I am a huge history buff. I'm always craving new information, and so the fact that y'all also include all of the history behind all these different spiritual and religious systems just means the world to me, and just makes my works so much richer and just better. My poetry is a whole other animal entirely when it comes to my writing. When I am writing my novels like these, it's very methodical. Of course, inspiration is a very thunderstruck sort of thing. It just sort of happens and I just write it all out and it's wonderful. But then when it comes time to take that inspiration story and then turn it into an actual book, it is a very methodical process. There's a lot of steps that I take. There's just a lot of formulaic stuff that goes into taking that idea and actually making it into a book. Whereas my poetry, I would say, is my purest form of my inspiration and also my personal spiritual belief system. In that, when I write poetry, I have to be in a certain headspace in order to achieve my poetry. And the best way that I can describe this is that I go into a trance-like state once I achieve this mindset, this feeling, this mood that I'm in whenever I'm inspired to write my poetry. And whether it's I will sit at my computer in front of my keyboard, or I will sit with pen and paper in hand, it doesn't really matter which one I do. The words just come to me. The words just happen. And a lot of times when I'm writing my poetry, I'm actually not really aware of what I'm writing. It just sort of comes to me. It's hard to explain. It just truly feels as if I am literally moved by the Muses to write something, that it's just flowing through me and it comes onto the page. And then after I'm done writing it and I go back and I read it, it's just crazy to see how all these different words and thoughts and little fragments just all come together to create this beautiful poetry. And it's often a surprise when I read it because I'm not aware of what I'm doing when I'm writing it. I'm truly not. It's the wildest thing, y'all. It truly is. It's just a beautiful experience. Though a lot of times it's also a painful experience. There is a lot of poetry that I've written over the years that has been an outlet to express some of the more difficult things that I've gone through in my life, as well as a lot of difficult emotions that sometimes we have to sit with in order to be able to move forward with our life, to move past these sort of difficult things. And while it can be just as exhilarating to write those, it also has its own sort of pain and melancholy that is attached to that. And of course, wouldn't we all love to write happy, fun, colorful poetry all the time, but then life also wouldn't be true or as realistic. And that's the other thing, is that whenever I sit down to write my poetry, I don't decide what I'm going to write, whether it's going to be happy or sad or colorful or melancholy or whatever. It just happens. It's literally the muses move me. Squishy's given his input. Sorry about that. Yeah. But the muses literally move me. I just feel as if these words are just flowing through me onto the page, that it's like I'm just like this conduit and they're just coming onto the page and I'm like barely even in control of these words, and it's an incredible feeling. It really truly is, and I just feel incredibly blessed that I have this ability to create these poems and to channel these words in order to make these just beautiful scenes on paper for y'all to read. And part of this is also illustrated in the art books that I create with my best friend Brian Thompson. And for those of y'all that are unfamiliar, my art books are this combination of my writing and my poetry and my artwork and Brian's photography. So it basically creates this like full visual narrative experience. It's really awesome. I love creating these books with Brian. They are fantastic. And for a lot of those, he will put together the book in that he'll put together the photos to tell the story that he wants to tell. So he'll arrange them in the order for what he wants to tell, and then he'll hand over the PDF to me of, okay, here's what the book is going to look like in terms of the photography he's going to use. And he's like, fill in the blanks for me, whatever artwork or writing or poetry that I want to include. And a lot of times for these, not only will I utilize existing work for these books, but I will also create new work specifically for that book. And it's always been very interesting for me when I create poetry that is specifically for these books, just looking through these images and just seeing this story play out in my head and then relating that through the poetry is just a fascinating process. And again, it's very much that the muses move me, that the words just come to me as I'm looking at this photo story, and that's what makes these books so incredible, is that it's just this hybrid narrative experience. And I love that Brian loves to be a part of that with me, that he wants us to put together our different talents in order to tell a larger story. Lastly is my artwork. So over the past few years, I have focused more intensely on my acrylic paintings as well as my digital illustrations. And I have done other art forms in the past, watercolor, charcoal, colored pencils. These are just the art forms that have really taken my interest as of late. And again, the muses move me with these in that when I sit down to do a drawing or a painting, and that's if I don't have a project that I have to do. So I have a lot of art pieces that I do, whether it's a client commission or I also illustrate my own stories. So with Geisha Hands, I actually illustrated 47 color illustrations that appear in the book. So I do a lot of projects like that where I will create artwork for specific things. But aside from all of that, when I sit down and I want to create a digital drawing or a painting, just because I don't have a reason other than I just feel like it, a lot of times I don't plan out what I'm going to draw or paint. I just sit before the canvas or I just sit before my computer and it just happens. I just start to have an idea of, oh my God, this is so beautiful and I'm going to make this and I'm going to do that, and it just takes shape. And of course, there is a bit of self-editing in that as well, especially with the digital art, in making sure that things like lighting and shading and blending and all that good stuff makes the artwork look beautiful and all that. But the original sitting there and having this idea and putting the brush to the canvas or drawing on my computer, just all of that, it's just so fascinating to me that I'll just sit down in front of an empty screen or an empty canvas with nothing. And then once I sit and I look at it, just all of a sudden, immediately, I just feel this great sense of inspiration, and I just feel moved to create. And just these beautiful visuals will just come to me, and I'll just put them on the canvas. And that's the best way that I can really describe what that feels like to y'all, in that I just feel so incredibly blessed by the Muses that I have all these different creative talents. And I also recognize that I am talented at different levels, that definitely my writing talent is king. It is way, way up here. My artistic and my performing talents are definitely lesser than my writing talent. My writing talent is just through the roof. But I feel like part of that is also what helps give me perspective with my creative gifts, is that there will always be people who will be more talented, more inspired, more hardworking in any of these avenues. And I love that, because then that gives me the ability to have mentors, to have others that inspire me, people that I look up to. That there are a lot of people on social media that I follow, whether it's for writing or art or performing, and I just love that I can learn from them and get inspired from them, because they're better than me, or maybe not better, but they're just talented in a different way. And I just love being able to recognize that and just continually grow myself. But I just wanted to share all of this with you, because it is a huge pillar in my pantheon of my spirituality, because I do recognize that these are tremendous blessings that I have been given, and I endeavor every day to use them as fully as I possibly can. And along the way, sometimes I do get a little lost by doing a little bit too much and losing the joy in those blessings, and just churning out lots of work, as many of y'all have probably seen on my social media over the course of the pandemic. But events like this always help me to refresh myself and recharge, and just reclaim that joy of that. At the end of the day, it's about creating those beautiful, inspiring pieces and sharing that joy, sharing that vision. So I just want to thank y'all so very much for watching this video. I hope it was explanatory, that it helped you to better understand my brain and how I get all these crazy things on the page, on the canvas, all that good stuff. Again, blessings all around, and I hope so very much that I will be able to perform for y'all in 2022. Hopefully, we will all be healthy and happy and living our lives again in 2022. I am hopeful for that. If y'all are interested in purchasing my books or my art, you can come see me at the event if you are an in-person guest. If you are here on Zoom, feel free to check out my website, alicetheauthor.com, and I have a full catalog of the books there. You can also email me at littlealice@cloudorchid.com. If you do have any art requests, I do take art commissions, so feel free to email me. Also, if you are on any of my social media, my Facebook, my Twitter, or my Instagram, feel free to send me a DM if you are confused about how to request an art commission or how to find my books online. I will be happy to help you. And of course, if you have any questions that is specific to my craft, to my pantheon, to my spiritual system, or how I go about creating these spiritual systems for my novels, also feel free to reach out, drop me a line, an email, a DM, whatever. I am always happy to discuss that. So I want to thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful time at this beautiful event. Bye bye.